My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans.
Hi, and welcome back to MagisTalk. I'm your host, Dan Finucane, and I'm joined by my co-host and Jesuit brother, Ian Michael Peoples. Today is a special episode for us.
Because it's the first time you've ever used my middle name.
That's right.
And it's also our 50th episode of MagisTalk. So that's nearly a year's worth of episodes, releasing one episode a week. And so we've taken some time over the past few weeks to reflect back on the year and savor some of the best moments from the show during the first 49 episodes. Included in these moments are a few different hairstyles, if you remember throughout the course of the past year, and definitely some experimentation with facial hair, and even a couple moments when we got a little silly. And Dan, I just want to say, commenting on hairstyles and facial hair, as we reviewed those few episodes, you're my friend, right?
I am your friend.
And audience, I imagine you care about me too. Why didn't anybody tell me to get a haircut?
We were all thinking it. In fact,
you did say it on air.
When you weren't looking at the camera, I was talking with the audience and saying, "Go look at this guy." So,
you did mention it on camera one time.
But you look much more clean cut now.
Yeah, I look like I can participate in society a little bit.
Absolutely.
Now.
Yeah, you don't look like you were hiding out in a cave somewhere. Yeah.
Ignatius hid out in a cave.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. You didn't do the fingernail thing.
No, I cut the fingernails.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite moments from this past year happened sometime over the summer, I think, is when it aired, where we had actually filmed a few episodes in a row, and by the last episode of the day, Ian doesn't blink for a good 30 seconds. He's just staring at the camera while he's operating the teleprompter. So let's go ahead and take a look at that footage. Doesn't mean they have all the answers right away. The bishops depend on educated people like theologians, philosophers, and even medical doctors when discussing or thinking about things that fall into the respected purview of each. They also rely on the people of God with regards to the sensus fidei, or sense of the faithful. They listen to the people of God to learn who and what inspires them to live out their faith. And they take those aspects of faith life seriously. And there you have it. In fact, there is a conspiracy theory being floated about whether Ian is a human being or a lizard person. So if you want to weigh in on that conspiracy theory, please write it in our show notes.
I really don't know how I did that. I mean, I went like 40 seconds without blinking. It was incredible.
It was impressive.
Yeah, no, I couldn't do that now if I tried. Speaking of maybe sort of embarrassing moments, Dan, also, when we had that Lent episode, you were still getting used to being in front of the camera a little bit, getting used to the back and forth.
That's right. It's hard.
When we asked about what you were going to do for Lent, you had a weird comment about vegetables that I just think we should watch again.
If we must. As I've been reflecting, I don't always eat that well. I eat a lot of just like garbage food, not literally from the garbage, but just, snack food. And so I'm hoping during this Lent to eat healthier, to become acquainted again with vegetables in a more intimate relationship by eating them more. So I'm looking forward to eating healthier because the deeper part isn't just because I want to be healthy, but because I really believe that as I'm becoming more and more of an adult, in my mid-30s, I'm recognizing the importance of taking care of my body.
So I'm sure the audience is wondering, Dan, Did you have a more intimate relationship with vegetables? Did you eat healthier this past year?
I think the better question is, do I have a more intimate relationship with vegetables? And the answer is, we're working on it. There's always, when you're growing in intimacy, as spiritual directors now, there's always resistance in the spiritual life, growing towards intimacy with God, and it's no different than with vegetables.
Well, I hope your diet does get better.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
There's
Still
nothing
weird
more to say.
comment.
There's nothing more to say that's going to make that sound normal.
Nope.
Yeah, sorry.
So, with the silly parts aside, and maybe the weird parts, as we reviewed this year, we were amazed at the many ways we have encountered God's Spirit active and alive in especially the conversations we've had with one another and with the guests that we've had on the show. And in a spirit of gratitude, we want to share what we think are our top 10 moments from the first 49 episodes.
So we'll begin with our 10th favorite moment from this past year. And it came during an interview with Sister Sarita Vasquez, talking about her advice on how to improve your faith life by becoming more reflective.
The one thing I would recommend is become a reflective person. I think that, as a poet said, the world is too much with us. There are so many distractions. And so we seem to drift through life, or we fly through life from one thing to the other. And we don't take time to reflect. Why did I think that? Where did that come from? Why did I say that? Why did I say that so angrily? Where is that anger coming from? Why did I do that? I think that we need to reflect. We need to become a more reflective people. And if we do, this entire nation will be blessed. That's how I feel.
And so for those of you who know Sister Sarita, obviously I would say someone who's done so much good in Belize and someone who's so steeped in Ignatian spirituality. And so when she was talking about becoming more reflective, one of the things, our next comments on the show were about the examine, right? And how the examine is a prayer that we can use to deepen that self-reflection. So just some great wisdom from one of Belize, the Catholic Church and Belize wisdom figures, I would say.
I love that quote of, the world is too much with us. Mm-hmm. So important to take that time to be more reflective, to get away from all the noise of our lives.
That's right. And so speaking of, wisdom figures in Belize, our next person, the next clip that we have is from our episode with Father Bill Snyders, who spent I think the better part of 35 years here, has done a lot of work out at Belize Central Prison, at the rehabilitation center that Dan currently works at, and was back with us earlier this year, and we were lucky enough to have him on the show. And so here he talks about the first week of the spiritual exercises, which really plays into Dan's work and my work at the prison, and especially the work that Father Snyders did as well. So let's watch that clip.
But at the beginning, when an entrance class was like 100 guys, can you imagine having 100 young, and most of them didn't have much of an education or background. So that was a particular challenge in the early days of ARC. Juan Vega did a great job. He was director. And then soon, I'd say within 3 years, they had the smaller entrance groups of 25 to 30 men at a time. That was much more digestible for the director. At the beginning, no, it was a tough go. So you learn by doing, and no substitute for experience, as you guys can verify.
Sure. And something that I've heard a lot of guys talk about who've been through the ARC or currently there is your work with the fifth step, step 5, and the importance of, sharing those, if you want to call them, sometimes guys will refer to them as sins or mistakes that they've made, and being able to offer them the sacrament of confession. But more importantly, something that I know you do with the guys is to really explain what sin is and to give them a sense for what does it mean to have a God who's loving and merciful and rescues us from that. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that.
Well, we Jesuits, as soon as we get in, we do the spiritual exercises. And the first week of the spiritual exercise is on sin, the triple sin. El Diablo, our first parents who were totally duped. And then other individuals. And then you get to examining yourself too. I think that's an important, it helps them get perspective so they don't see themselves in their addiction as just victims. They have sin in their life too, and to be accepting it. But I start that off. It's called Sin and Redemption. Well, I give a strong push on redemption. What Christ has done. It's just incredible. The love of the Father in this. So I love teaching that to the guys. And when you have men in the group who have a little bit of an education and are able to ask good questions and enter into dialogue, all the better. I love that.
I really love that explanation. It's concise, first of all, of the first week of the exercises, but it gets at the heart of the grace, the gift that we ask for in prayer that week, which is, the grace of knowing yourself to be a loved sinner. And, Father Bill talks about it within the context of people dealing with addiction and struggling with addiction. But I think it goes for any of us. And so I think that it's such a universal thing to want to enter into a space where we acknowledge our faults. But the best way to do it, the insight from St. Ignatius, is that we do that by knowing that we're loved first.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and of course, Father Snyder was just talking about the context that is the 12 steps. So of AA or NA, but the 12-step program, and the beginning of those 12 steps, he talks about utilizing the first week. So yeah, so concise, so good.
Yeah. Our eighth moment comes from our first interview that we conducted on the show with Father Mark Thibodeau, who was our novice master and currently serving as a pastor at one of our parishes in New Orleans. And we really liked the moment where Father Mark talks about kind of this very basic question in Ignatian spirituality: what is discernment? What are some of the basics of discernment? If you were going to give an elevator pitch for why discernment's important and what it involves, what would you say?
Absolutely. So if you look in a dictionary, the sort of secular definition of discernment probably wouldn't be that much different from decision making. To discern and to decide from a secular point of view is probably about the same thing. So from a secular point of view, to discern is just to work out something in your mind and make a decision. But from a Christian perspective, and especially from an Ignatian perspective, to discern, I think, would imply a pondering in a prayerful way the decisions that you are to make. So it's decision making with from a faith perspective. It's decision making with the goal in mind being God's will being your ultimate goal. So it's not just which one is better, it's which one is God's will. Is it option A or option B? So I think that's kind of what discernment is from a Christian perspective. Now I'm going to go a little bit further and talk about discernment from an Ignatian perspective, because St. Ignatius Loyola, there are different saints, and a lot of different saints spoke about discernment in different ways. I'm not really much of an expert in any of the other ways, but with St. Ignatius, he has a very, very particular way of looking at it. And this is how he sees it. He basically says that in order for us to to discern our decisions, we have to be able to discern the spirits. And by the spirits, he means we have to discern the movements within ourselves, discern which movements inside of me are from the good spirit and which ones are from what he calls the evil spirit. I like to call it the false spirit. He says that at all times, and we all know this, right? We all know that at any given moment in our day, we're attracted to do something, we're drawn towards something, and we're also sort of repulsed by some things. We want to kind of back away or maybe even run away from some other things, or maybe repulsed and we want to sort of aggressively oppose it. So there's all of these twists and turns, these pulls and pushes within ourselves constantly. And so when your alarm rings in the morning, there's a movement, a pull towards hitting the snooze and turning over. There's also a pull towards getting up and making a cup of coffee and splashing water in your face and getting going. And so Ignatius would say, in order to decide things well, you have to figure out who is giving you these invitations. Which spirit is pulling you towards some things and pulling you away from other things. And St. Ignatius says that's actually the tricky part. The tricky part isn't deciding the A or B. The tricky part is figuring out which spirit is drawing you towards one thing or another. And he says once you can figure that out, then deciding the option becomes, I don't know if I would say easy, but it becomes clear because you simply go with the good spirit, the spirit that comes from God. So I guess that would be kind of all of it in a bit of a nutshell. So
yeah, thanks, Mark. So Dan, both you and I learned from Tibbs, Father Mark Thibodeau, during the novitiate, our first 2 years as Jesuits, your first year, correct? So he was our novice director, and yeah, it's just great to hear him. It's like back to the basics kind of stuff about what is discernment. It's helpful for me to hear and to remember, because as you get more into the busyness, day-to-day work, you can forget these sort of basic principles.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way he describes it, it's not, there are complicating factors that come along because we're complicated people, but it's actually not all that complicated. It actually, sitting with what he's talking about, I think helps understand what we're doing a little bit better.
Yeah, and the difference that he says between, it doesn't necessarily make decisions easier, but it makes them clearer, right? And that's very helpful, yeah. Our next clip is with Mr. Sebastian Cayetano, kind of a local legend of sorts, and parishioner at St. Martin de Porres, and runs a museum out of his home, basically, here in Belize. And you had the opportunity to sit down and interview him. I was sick that day, but at the end, you asked him to pray with us. So let's check that out.
Would you mind finishing our episode by praying in Griffinah?
No problem. Okay. Let us pray. Wabchile selbe inebola biri tulula baruha Adigola leba buserbe ya obo kila digno sir. Lubo iga frame ugunya tolana sagwe. Fernabe watara case feru de man hatarba yon. Madin habali lemer figo ansa fabule diga sungri bani itarala. Mabuga Maria binti blau flisi. Ani haburme bum. Binete hala sung hiare. Binete bubider Jesus. Maria gonflet lokchubongi. Freak ba wag wagaga figonte. Uguele lomanida dan luame itarala. Waguchi wabungite waguchu Maria. Hamahar wayunago. Wato huago. Long gada lan wabarasego lidon weyule. Gada lano waranseha. Abugra huma either huma de chigna wabarasego. Lo abugra la lao isenit. Lo madarangilo. Iyurhe warasa wage garino. Lo wachilabala lemes. Ichiga sereme lo wabungit. Le uchile lo meraha. Lo mapro gonfleti itarala. I spoke about, I recited Our Father first, and then the Hail Mary, and I asked God to help our leaders, Garifuna leaders, especially as we celebrate the 19th of November, as we celebrate who we are. We thank God for who we are, and we call on all Belizeans to join with us and celebrate together who we are and who Belize is. We are part of Belize, integral part. So, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen. I loved this episode, and what I really appreciated is the pride that Mr. Cayetano has in Garifuna culture and in history, and that he is able to share that in so profound a way, in a lot of different ways, as a teacher. And something else he said in that interview that we talked about is, he speaks every language that is spoken in Belize. He's kind of a bridge to different parts of Belize, and just a real treasure to be able to be with him. And then to end by asking him to pray in Garifuna.
Yeah, and it was great. And I love his words at the end to say, I prayed that, that people would join us in celebrating Garifuna culture and celebrating Belize, because these two things are united, right? And they're that Garifuna culture is an integral part of Belize, and I think Garifuna culture also celebrates and has helped teach all these other people, like in the Mayan villages and everything, which is why I think Sebastian speaks Quechua and Mopan, is that he helped teach basically all of Belize, and his parents did as well. So, like I said, legend. Local legend. So great to have him on.
Our sixth moment is a recent one, probably the most recent of our list here, from our Christmas beef episode. No, not about a kind of beef you would eat on Christmas, but a debate that we had about when to start listening to Christmas music. And I think what was really great, and what you'll see in this clip, is that there's a lot of humor in the conversation, but we actually got pretty serious and poignant at parts too. So take a listen in. So I want to pose a question on behalf of Brian and myself to the two of you, and it's I'm going to ask two questions here. When is it appropriate to stop listening to Christmas music? And I think that might be controversial as well. But also, why is it okay to listen to it all year round? Because doesn't that make it not special then? Like, isn't it nice that, it's weird that we can get, at least in the US, we can get bananas all year round. And we lose our taste for how special bananas are.
Oh, you mean like literally bananas?
Literally.
I thought we go bananas all year round, which we do.
We've gotten used to having anything we want, but isn't there something special about having it just for a specific amount of time each year?
Well, I'll say I'm not advocating that we only listen to Christmas music year round. Although if somebody wants to do that.
A true maximalist.
A true maximalist. So maybe there could be even further Christmas maximalists than me. But all I'm saying is that it's an acceptable expression of part of our spirituality that's not bound to one part of the year. So it's kind of like, okay, it can be more intensified during this season, but it doesn't have to be absent in other seasons. I would say a full Christmas season goes at least to the baptism of Jesus, maybe even to presentation of Jesus. So let's say early February would be a time to...
So Silent Night until early February.
Sure, why not? If that's your thing.
If that's your thing.
I'm gonna agree with David on this one. I think I won't be blaring it around the house until early February, but I feel completely justified to at least listen to it through the fullness of the Christmas liturgical season of Christmas. And as to listening to it year round, I don't judge people who might want to listen to it all the time year round. I think the times that I go to it when it's not the Christmas season is those times, like I said, when I just need to feel a little more hope, a little more hopeful, a little more, and maybe there's memories attached to it. And this gets to your point, Brian, about maybe Christmas is not a great time for some people because perhaps they have bad memories attached to it. But growing up, I mean, and I thank God that I have a wonderful, I was blessed with a great family, and Christmas was always a time of togetherness in a special way. Like, for some reason, I have this one moment of riding back from midnight mass in the car, and everyone's kind of drowsy and tired, but we know we're opening one present when we get back to the house, and we just got done with midnight mass, which always has felt like an especially holy liturgy for me, and listening to Christmas music in the car, and it was just very. It's just a great memory. So I think maybe there's a little bit of that attached to it too, or there's like experiences that I'm sort of drawing on through listening to the music.
I think that's a really good point you make. I mean, I think probably for all of us, we have associations on all kinds of different levels when it comes to Christmas and Advent and the music that we listen to. And those aren't just memories attached to the music itself, but I think those are memories that in some ways maybe shape our spirituality. And so, yeah, there are experiences of loss that I had. I loved Christmas growing up. And then I remember, not to get too serious here, I mean, when my dad got sick and then died, it's like all the Christmas traditions changed. And that was a really, really hard time. That was a very difficult time. And so for me, my spirituality, rather than trying to run away from that darkness, started moving into that darkness. And I say darkness not in a negative way, but that it's in some sense, to find the incarnation there, as you were talking about, right? So finding some hope there, or going to this place where, yeah, we're all still hoping, we're all still longing. But I think you make a really good point. I mean, these things that happen to us in our lives really do have a big impact on our spiritual leanings.
One of the reasons I love that episode and maybe even that moment so much is that I think it does kind of encapsulate our community, our Jesuit community, especially here, I mean, in Belize, just the men that we have in our community, and the combination of humor and seriousness that we can kind of engage with at the same dinner conversation at different moments. Right. So I think that was a good example of our community dynamics that on our best days, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think it shows too that kind of the joy of Christmas doesn't always mean a lot of happiness. That joy and happiness are different things. And there might actually be, maybe joy is the wrong word, but even the sorrow that we experience in missing somebody who's not there for Christmas, that there's something in even that longing as part of Advent leading up to Christmas. And how is Christ coming even in our pain? So that's right. I think it showed that there's a lot of different ways of experiencing this season.
Our next episode, our next clip is from our episode with Professor Gian Vasquez of St. John's College. He's a history teacher there. And here he talks about Belizean identity. So let's take a look at that.
It strikes me, kind of your answer to the last question and this one, that the process of Belize developing its own story is ongoing, very much ongoing, and it's kind of contested. But I think there's probably a way to read that there's something frightening, like, oh, who are we really? But I think it's also exciting. Like, to me, I'm excited listening to you, hearing that the story of the people of Belize is still emerging. It's still growing. It's being created. 41 years after independence.
It is. Like America is what, 200 and something years old? And America's story is still being written.
Yeah, I'm not sure what part of the story we're in right now. We won't get into all that.
But we're relatively young.
Yeah. Yes.
And we're relatively young as an independent nation. But the way we are right now reminds me of like children now. Belize, when we got our independence, lots of things had already been created for us. Like if you would look at the Constitution has a lot of human rights embedded into it. Prior to the development of human rights and the UN, that didn't exist. It had to be developed. Like in the United States, you guys had to create the Bill of Rights, and that whole fight had to be ongoing, and then the civil rights movement had to be ongoing. Children nowadays, they're born with computers, gadgets. They have the internet. They can do lots more things than we can. And so Belize is unique in that we were birthed with lots of things already there for us. And so as we grew and we are far to one, we can utilize everything that's there. And so I think as far to one, we are writing our story, and we are doing it with all of this available to us, all this information that has come before us, and even watching other countries and what they have gone through and trying to, I won't do that, I won't. And if you're a student of history, then we look back and say, oh, that's why I say historians or history students are the most intelligent.
I thought about majoring in history in college. Had I known that historians are the most intelligent people, I would have gone with that. No, I thought that what Jan said was really just impactful for me. You know, somebody who's new to Belize. And I think there is a temptation, no matter where you are, to think, you know, history's kind of settled. But history's not settled at all. You know, we're still learning a lot about it, you know, as we look back. But who we are moving forward and who Belize is becoming, I just find that very exciting.
Yeah, and I think that the analogy that he talked about with sort of independence as like a child growing up, and the fact that they gained their independence in a world where democracy was already the sort of most common form of government, or the highest ideal of government that we can kind of conceive had been achieved in democracy and all these, and this notion of like universal human rights. And I've never thought about those things before, that the fact that Belize came into its own when all of these things had already sort of been formulated and were ready to be adopted by Belize as they came into their independence. So just an interesting way of thinking about Belizean independence, and a good reminder from Professor Vasquez that America, you know, our country's story is still being written as well. Like you said, history is not stagnant. We're on the move.
That's right. Our fourth moment is we had a little bit of trouble because there are 2 episodes where we interviewed Father Jeremy Zippel, and so we had to kind of narrow it down. But I think we picked a good moment, asking Father Jeremy about what he'll miss most about Belize. As you may or may not know, he's currently gone from Belize, doing his last stage of formation in Mexico. So let's listen to his interview.
I'm wondering, what will you miss most about Belize?
About Belize? The rice and beans and stewed chicken.
Of course.
1, 2, 3.
That's right.
I don't even know where to begin with that question. I really do love it here. I guess first and foremost, I'll miss the people. I'll miss my parish, St. Martin's. I'll miss SJC and our students and my colleagues over there. I found Belize to be a place of incredible warmth and welcome, a place where I've gotten to know so many wonderful people who've really been generous in inviting me into their culture and their life and their homes. So the people, number one.
Number one. And then food, and then the rice and beans.
And then the rice and beans, yeah. And last but not least, Reno. I don't want to leave the northern mestizo Spanish foods out either, because they're pretty good. They're not as good as rice and beans, but they're pretty good.
But rice and beans it's like a Catholic food. It's pretty universal, right?
Sure.
Everywhere kind of has their unique blend of rice and beans, right?
True.
It's an enculturated food.
I think you
I
could
would
say
say.
that. Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that I think made me think of this episode in our top 10 moments was, it was one of our episodes that went kind of worldwide, but also it was very popular in Belize because Father Jeremy was very beloved here, and I think that's because people know that he loves Belize, that he loves the people here, and I think that's why he was so welcomed into people's homes, and will be when he comes back, God willing. So so it's just it's great to see. It's great to see that love kind of, and how it's formed him and formed his experience is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got a message from a Jesuit in Rome saying that he'd seen the episode, and I think it shows not only kind of the witness that Father Jeremy gives, but it's also showing that Belize is on the map. On the map, that's right. So our next episode is with one of Father Jeremy's good friends and somebody he worked with. It was with Dr. Thompson, who was the former director of Karl Huesner Hospital, and also former director of the hospice program, Belize Hospice. And so has done incredible work accompanying the sick and dying and helping make them more comfortable. And here she shares with us a story about a man who refused pain medicine so that he could be lucid in his final moments with his wife and children. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, and you talked about lessons that you've learned from the people that you've accompanied as they're dying. Can you name one or two of those lessons, or maybe there's a story that illustrates a lesson that you've learned?
One patient that, for me, I think the greatest accomplishment for me with patients is not just calming their physical pain, but for them to be able to trust God and find that this is just a temporary thing. And in spite of what they're going through, they will still trust God and still be able to praise Him. And I remember back in 2010, this is like the only patient I've ever seen this way. He was in a lot of pain, and I wanted to give him medication, and he said, "No, I don't want the medication. I want to die very lucid. And I want to die praising God, and I want to die telling my wife that I love her." And so we called in their wife. It was another nurse and myself. We had stayed the night there with them. And so we called in the wife and the sister to come, that he was getting ready to die. And so we started singing and praying and reading the Bible. And when we sang, he would raise his weak hands and they would fall. And he would still try and raise his hands when we sang. And then he would tell his wife in a whisper, "I love you, I love you." Until the very end, he said that, and then he died. And to me, that impacted me, that he was able to put his suffering second and put God and his wife first before his suffering. And that was like a real sacrifice, because he was in excruciating pain, but he preferred to suffer that pain and be able to praise God instead of getting numb with the pain, numb off the pain with the medications. No? So that to me was like, that's the first patient I've ever seen doing that. And it really impacted me that his faith was there with him. No?
Yeah, I found our entire interview, if I could have, I would have put the entire interview probably in the number 3 spot, just because I think Dr. Thompson's way of sharing stories, and this story in particular just I found very moving. And just, I think it goes, it's not, yes, this person was an incredible witness himself, but it also, I think, demonstrates the kind of setting that Dr. Thompson kind of set up in her work doing hospice, that, it's not just the cessation of life, that we can actually, she was inviting people to die well. And And that's a gift that I think, I think we probably all hope for, we all pray for. But that story, I think, just really demonstrates somebody who could teach us all how to do it.
And I love, we have this doctor approaching her work with the desire to help people grow closer to God as well. And so the combination of those two things is wonderful. And I think Father Jeremy said that Dr. Thompson helped teach him how to be a priest here in Belize through her work, which are powerful words. Our next clip is with two men who formerly incarcerated now. So men who were at Belize Central Prison who we interviewed around the time of Easter, around the time of Holy Week, to talk about the passion and death of Jesus and what it means to them. And they both give really profound answers for us. And so let's check those out.
Now, he views his own history alongside the passion, death, and resurrection of our Lord.
Jesus was sold out by his own. He was arrested. He was imprisoned. He was tortured. And he was nailed to the cross. Then he died. Then he resurrected and went up to heaven and sat on the right-hand side of God. When I look at that personal, if I would put that in a personal level for me, a personal spiritual level, I would put it like to say, I went through what Jesus went through, knowing that there were people in my life who said they loved me and was with me and all the good talks. And then when it came time for me to go through what I went through, I was left all alone. Then I came to prison, and that's where I died. But as I continue in the journey of prison and practicing faith and seeing or receiving the blessings, which is the consequences, I would say, or the reward of faith, or of working in good faith, or walking in good faith, I resurrected, feeling a new sense of life, feeling a new sense of hope at a very much higher level than I've ever experienced. And now, if I could say it like this, looking at my future from the way how things is going right now in my life, right now, I am on the right side of God. But of course it has a lot of different aspects with Jesus' story and mine, because Jesus is Jesus and I am me. But the pain that we could imagine he went through, I felt in my personal life, going through my journey to being somebody, or to actually wanting and to living and to want to love and to want to, because yes, when I was being told I was being loved, I didn't even know what was love. So now experiencing the faith on the level that I currently am, I am able to give love in a genuine way, and also the way that I am receiving it, I know that there has to be a God.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about that clip from Lane Greenidge is when he talks about finding out what love is. And it comes through, having this experience of experiencing, in some way the passion and death, and then the resurrection of Jesus. And it's even more special, 9 months later from that episode, knowing that Lane now works at Belize Central Prison. He's the director. one of the rehab centers there for remanded men, and getting a chance to see him kind of flourish now. It's just it's one of the best things that I've had a chance to see during my time in Belize is how Lane just he's put his words into action.
Yeah, and he talked about that path of Jesus, right? And now it seems like he's kind of in that resurrection moment where he's using his experiences of suffering, of death, and he's helping lift other guys up there who might be going through something similar. Wonderful.
Amazing.
Our next clip is from another man there, a man named Dennis, and we will listen to him talk about being nailed to the cross. So his experience of identifying with the experience of Christ on the cross.
Not only does Dennis recognize Jesus' sacrifice, but he feels like he has experienced that same sacrifice in his own life.
When I get sentenced, I feel like they nailed me for the cross. You know, because when I get sentenced, I have to go front of a judge, right? I know sometimes the judge, they're unjust, right? So when I get sentenced, I feel like they just nail me for the cross. You know, innocently. You know, so my life partly relate to that, right? My life partly relate to that. You know, he do a lot. He do a lot for me, and sometimes we just don't see it. Like, we just don't see what he try to do for we. You know, that's why certain things just happen bad for we, not for we life, until we open for we eyes and see the vision when he got set for we, right? You know, like what I say, I like a living testimony, right? He saved my life, so all the bad things that I used to do in the past, I wash my hand off of that, right? I can't go back to the lifestyle. Eh?
You know, it's interesting. I didn't actually hear this the first few times listening to this clip, but he talks about washing his hands of his past, you know, and how Pilate is also washing his hands. It's a very different meaning for Pilate. And Pilate's asking this question, what is truth? But, you know, here Dennis is talking about his life being saved through this ultimate sacrifice that Jesus goes through and gives to each of us, all of us. And just hearing how personal it is for him, very, very moving.
Yeah, and identifying that salvation, that it's personal for him, and that he wants to. I mean, what is baptism except like washing us, you know, from the stain of original sin, right? Yeah. And so washing us from the wrongs that not only we've done, but that humanity has done, right? And so, and I think people who a lot of guys who are inner city here who get gang involved, they're born into a neighborhood where they're kind of from the very get-go being pulled into this life. Some make it out, right? And we keep praying for Dennis because Dennis is now on
he's out on parole.
On parole. So let's keep praying for Dennis and for Lane and Thanksgiving for what Jesus has done in their lives and the lives of other guys who are incarcerated at Belize Central Prison. So our last moment is with Father Superior, Brian Christopher. And we get 2 moments here.
That's right.
Yeah, we couldn't choose, but our first is Father Brian talking about the importance of getting involved and why he wanted to get involved in gang ministry or ministry with gang-involved youth and young adults. So let's take a look at that. And you mentioned that you have worked for years, even prior to being in Belize with gang-involved youth. Can you say a little bit more about what led you to getting into that kind of work?
It came out of doing the spiritual exercises when I was a novice. And one of the real graces of the retreat was identifying this desire in me, not just to walk with people who were kind of on the margins of society, but people who are on the margins of the margins, right? So there are people in our world, people who are sick and families that are hungry, and you just sort of naturally feel this empathy and this compassion and this desire to serve, and that's all good. But then you have other people, like street gangs, who you see them and I think maybe a lot of people feel anger towards them. Look at how they're destroying society. And yet when you get to know these guys, they're just human beings like me and you, you know? And when you read the Gospels, that's who Jesus hangs out with. You know, when Jesus is born and the shepherds come to visit him, we think of shepherds as, oh, they're so darling, little shepherds with their cute little sheep. No, the shepherds had a terrible reputation for being thieves and drunkards and, you know, all the rest. They were kind of like the gangsters of 2,000 years ago. And so imagine that when Christ was born, when God became a human being, the first outsiders to come and welcome him were these gangsters, were these outsiders, the people who were scorned. Not only were they poor, but they were demonized. And that's what we have going on here in Belize and in the United States and in a lot of places in the world. We've got these primarily young men, but also some young women who grow up in traumatizing environments. And I'm not saying that they're all victims, right? But let's recognize the complexity of what's going on. And they get labeled by society as gangsters, as criminals, as something less than human beings. And you know what? When you grow up in a way when everybody's labeling you as a threat, well, guess what happens? You start to live into that label. And that's been my experience, is that people live into the labels we give them. And for myself, I wanted to go and be with them and walk with them to let them know that I love them. Christ loves them. That when I look at them, I don't see gangster. I see human being who in many ways is not different, at least not in any fundamental ways than me. I struggle with anger probably more than most. And so I hear it.
I think what Father Brian points out, there's a lot there, and I think it's fitting that this is one of our top moments because it's grounded in his experience of prayer with the exercises, kind of showing the power of the exercises, but also just the way in which all of us, to a certain extent, no matter who we are, no matter where we are, there is a temptation to dehumanize. There is a temptation to reduce people around us to a label, whether it's gangster or what have you. So that message that what Jesus is doing in the gospel is to look beyond those labels, to see human beings, to see God's image made manifest in this particular person with their own story. I think that for Father Brian, it came through ministry with gang-involved youth, but I think we all are invited to see in the way that Jesus sees.
That's right. And what a perfect example of Ignatian spirituality, right? This encounter with Christ, this encounter with the people Christ loves, so that we can go out and encounter Christ and the people that Christ loves in the world. It's just a great example. This last one, though, is one of my favorite moments of all of our episodes. It is my favorite moment because it was so unexpected, and it's in the same episode that this really profound statement from Brian comes. But we asked Brian our final question in the end. It was a question that you came up with.
That's right. Yeah, no, it was a question about, I know that Father Brian likes musicals, and so I asked what's his favorite musical, and this is the response that we got.
and maybe that's your answer to this question. The question is, what would be your favorite musical?
Okay, I'm going to answer your question with a question. I want to see, can you identify? I'm going to sing the musical for you.
Wow.
And I want you to see if you can identify. Right. We're going to see how good you are at this.
Everyone listen up.
Okay.
Maria, I once met a girl named Maria, and suddenly that name will never be the same to me. Gentlemen?
I have no idea. You might need to sing more.
I think I know it. I think I know it. West Side Story, no?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. The 1961 version, not this new stuff.
Okay, so that would be your favorite.
I think that's my favorite. Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to say a little bit of why? Why that's your favorite?
I want to be in America. Okay, by me in America.
It's just catchy. It's catchy, huh?
It's extremely catchy. It's extremely catchy. And when I was in college, my roommate and I, one night, I'm not going to give any other details about circumstances, we decided to rewrite the lyrics. Anyway, I'm just going to stop right there. I'm going to stop right there.
Great.
And yes, it's a fun musical. Beautiful music. Yep.
So good.
So good.
It was when he stood up and started singing, I was in disbelief. It was like, you guys, the audience got the best of Father Brian Christopher that day. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, the best of Father Brian Christopher. And our best episode is also when my hair was probably at its most
finest,
intense,
most
developed form, longest and nastiest, I would say. But to go back to Father Brian, though, what a guy! What an episode!
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for our top 10 moments from our first year of our show, and we look forward to many more episodes ahead. And just so you know, if there was a favorite moment that you didn't see, one of your favorite moments, let us know. We're always excited to hear what you like about the show and what you want to hear or see more of. So leave us a comment. We're happy to hear that. And from both of us, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.